For 8 grueling years. I remember the exact moment my life turned into a living nightmare. "We know you stole it, you ungrateful thief!" my dad roared, his voice echoing off the walls of my bedroom. The sheer hatred in his eyes is something I will never forget. I lost my family, my peace of mind, and my entire youth to their blind accusations. But tonight, as I sit in my penthouse watching the red and blue police lights flash across my childhood home, listening to my parents beg for mercy while their perfect golden child is dragged away in handcuffs, I finally have my answer. The truth always comes out, but sometimes you have to be the one to orchestrate the grand finale. It all started when I was 15 years old. My name is Holden, and in my family I was always the invisible middle child. My younger brother, Declan, was 11 at the time and could do no wrong. He was the golden boy, the one who got the expensive toys, the endless praise, and the benefit of the doubt in every single situation. I, on the other hand, existed merely to occupy space. My dad, Harrison, was a stern man who fancied himself a collector of vintage watches. It was a hobby he threw far too much money at, proudly displaying his collection in a locked glass case in his study. One Tuesday evening, the entire house was turned upside down. Dad had come home from work, gone to admire his collection, and noticed that his prized possession was missing. It was a vintage Rolex worth roughly $20,000. Panic erupted. My mom, Cora, immediately went into hysterics, pacing the living room and wringing her hands. Dad was a tornado of rage, tearing through the study, convinced someone had broken in. But there were no signs of forced entry. The windows were locked. The alarm system had not been tripped. Naturally, their suspicion turned inward. They questioned Declan first. My sweet, innocent little brother looked up at them with wide, tear-filled eyes and swore he had been playing video games all afternoon. They hugged him, kissed his forehead, and told him they believed him. Then it was my turn. I told them the truth. I had been in the backyard reading a book. I had not even gone near the study. Dad narrowed his eyes, his jaw clenched tight. He did not say a word, just marched straight upstairs to my bedroom. I followed him, my heart pounding against my ribs, watching in horror as he began to rip my room apart. He pulled books off my shelves, dumped my laundry basket onto the floor, and tore the posters off my walls. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I did not take it," I pleaded, my voice cracking. He ignored me, his face red with exertion. He grabbed my mattress and heaved it off the box spring. And there, tucked neatly between the wooden slats, was the gleaming silver and gold band of the vintage Rolex. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stared at the watch, my brain failing to process how it had gotten there. I felt physically sick. Dad snatched the watch up, clutching it in his fist, and turned to face me. The look he gave me was one of pure, unadulterated disgust. "You thief," he spat. Mom had followed us upstairs and was standing in the doorway. She gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "Holden, how could you? I cannot believe I raised a criminal. Stop lying. We found it in your room." "I did not put it there. Someone must have hidden it," I cried out, desperation clawing at my throat. I looked at Declan, who was peeking out from behind Mom's legs. He had a strange, almost blank expression on his face. They did not listen. They did not care about logic or reason. The evidence was in my room, and the verdict was delivered instantly. That night, they did not just ground me. They took everything. My phone, my computer, even my books. They locked my door from the outside, turning my bedroom into a prison cell. I sat on the floor in the dark, tears streaming down my face, entirely unable to comprehend how my own flesh and blood could turn on me so fast. That was the first night of an 8-year sentence. The aftermath of the watch incident was far worse than the night it happened. You would think that since the watch was recovered undamaged, the situation would eventually cool down. It did not. Dad treated the event like a massive personal betrayal, an assault on his honor. A week later, he called me into the kitchen. Mom was sitting at the table, her arms crossed, looking at me like I was a piece of trash that had blown in from the street. Dad stood by the counter holding a piece of paper. Since you caused this family so much emotional distress, and since we clearly cannot trust you, Dad began, his tone ice cold, we need to ensure you understand the gravity of your actions. Words mean nothing. You need a lesson in consequences. I had spent the last 3 years working every odd job I could find in our neighborhood. I mowed lawns in the sweltering heat, shoveled snow in the freezing cold, and delivered papers before the sun even came up. I had saved up $4,500. It was my escape fund, my college fund, my only source of pride. You are going to withdraw your entire savings, Dad ordered. You will give it to me to hold. It will be collateral for your future good behavior. Maybe losing something you care about will cure your kleptomania. My stomach dropped. Dad, no, that is my money. I earned every single cent of it. I did not steal the watch. Mom slammed her hand on the table. Do not raise your voice to your father. You owe us for the stress you caused. You are lucky we did not call the police and have you dragged out of here in handcuffs. I felt a surge of rage, but I was utterly powerless. I was 15. They controlled my bank account. The next morning, Dad drove me to the bank in suffocating silence. He stood right behind me as the teller handed over an envelope filled with my hard-earned cash. $4,500. I handed it to my father, my hands shaking. He snatched it, counted it right in front of me, and nodded, slipping it into his jacket pocket. This money will not wash away your garbage character, he sneered as we walked back to the car. But it will teach you the price of sin. When we got back to the house, Declan was sitting on the front porch playing with a new handheld gaming console. He looked up as I walked past, and I swear on my life he smirked, a tiny, subtle upward curl of his lip. He knew. I knew he knew. But if I said a word, my parents would just punish me more for trying to blame the golden child. My life became a routine of forced labor and constant surveillance. If a spoon went missing from the kitchen drawer, I was interrogated. If Mom could not find her favorite earrings, I was subjected to a room search. They made me scrub the driveway with a wire brush, clean the gutters in the pouring rain, and paint the entire exterior of the garage. I was not allowed to attend school events, hang out with friends, or even eat dinner at the same time as them. My Uncle Tobias, Dad's younger brother, came over for Thanksgiving that year. He was the only one who seemed to notice how thin and exhausted I looked. While Mom and Dad were raving about Declan's stellar report card, Uncle Tobias pulled me aside into the hallway. Are you holding up okay, kid? He asked quietly. I just shook my head, too afraid to speak. Uncle Tobias sighed and patted my shoulder. Later, I heard him arguing with Dad in the kitchen. You are being too hard on the boy, Harrison. It has been months. He is a good kid, Tobias said. Stay out of this, Toby, Dad snapped back. You do not know what it is like living with a thief. He has a sickness. We have to break him to fix him. They did not fix me. They just broke my trust in them forever. I learned to survive by becoming a ghost in my own home. I spoke only when spoken to, I kept my head down, and I counted the days until I would be legally old enough to walk out the door. I thought the stolen money and the endless chores were the worst of it. But I had no idea how public my humiliation was about to become. Fast forward 3 years. I was 18, and it was the day of my high school graduation. You would think this would be a day of celebration, a moment to acknowledge my hard work. I had managed to maintain straight A's despite the toxic environment at home. But my parents attended the ceremony with faces made of stone, treating it as a burdensome obligation rather than a milestone. The ceremony was held on the football field. Hundreds of parents, students, and faculty were mingling on the grass afterward, taking photos and laughing. I was standing near the bleachers, holding my cheap cardboard diploma, waiting for Uncle Tobias, who had promised to bring me a small gift. Suddenly, I saw my parents storming across the field toward me. Mom's face was twisted in fury, and Dad looked like a bull ready to charge. Holden, Dad barked, his voice carrying over the chatter of the crowd. People began to turn their heads. Before I could ask what was wrong, Dad grabbed me by the arm, his grip bruising my skin. Where is it? Where is what? You are hurting me? I said, trying to pull away. Mom stepped right up into my personal space, pointing a shaking finger at my chest. Mr. Peterson's class fund envelope is missing from his desk. $300. We were just talking to him in the gymnasium, and he said it was gone. We know you were in the gym earlier. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom, I was in the gym lining up for the procession, with 200 other students. I did not take any envelope. Liar, Dad yelled. Empty your pockets. Now. Dad, people are watching? I whispered, panic rising in my throat as I noticed a circle forming around us. Parents of my classmates were whispering. Students were pointing. I do not care if the whole world is watching. Empty your pockets, or I will do it for you, he threatened. I had no choice. With trembling hands, I turned the pockets of my graduation gown inside out. Nothing. Then I reached into my dress pants and pulled out my keys, a few coins, and a lint-covered piece of gum. Take off your shoes, Mom demanded. I stood there in the middle of the football field, stripped of my dignity, pulling off my dress shoes and shaking them out in front of half the town. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Declan. He was leaning against the bleachers, his new iPhone raised, recording the entire thing. Harrison, stop this right now, a voice boomed. Uncle Tobias pushed through the crowd, looking furious. He stepped between me and my father. What the hell is wrong with you? This is his graduation day. Stay out of my family business, Toby. He is a thief, Dad growled. Just then, Mr. Peterson came jogging across the field, looking breathless and embarrassed. Mr. and Mrs. Vance, I am so sorry. I found the envelope. I accidentally left it in the glove compartment of my car this morning. It was never in the gym. The silence that fell over our little group was deafening. I looked at my parents, waiting for the apology, waiting for a shred of remorse. Dad simply adjusted his tie, refusing to meet my eyes. Well, better safe than sorry. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Mom nodded in agreement. Let this be a reminder, Holden. We are always watching you. Without another word, they turned and walked toward the parking lot, signaling for Declan to follow. They did not congratulate me. They did not say they were proud. They left me standing barefoot on the grass, holding my shoes, while the rest of the school stared at me in pity. Uncle Tobias put a heavy hand on my shoulder. I am so sorry, kid, he muttered. I did not cry. I think that was the moment my heart finally turned to stone. Standing there, stripped of my dignity while Declan filmed it, I made a silent vow. I was leaving, and I would make them deeply regret this. The night of my 18th birthday, exactly 2 months after graduation, I packed a single duffel bag. I did not leave a note. I did not say goodbye. I walked out the front door at 2 in the morning, taking only the clothes on my back and a burning desire to prove them wrong. The first few years were sheer hell. I bounced between cheap motels and sleeping in my beat-up sedan. I worked 3 jobs: a night auditor at a shady hotel, a barista during the morning rush, and a stockboy on weekends. I survived on instant noodles and spite. But I had a plan. Being falsely accused of stealing had done something to my brain. It made me obsessed with security, with protecting assets, with making sure nothing could ever be taken or planted without a trace. While other kids my age were partying in college, I was sitting in the back room of the hotel during the graveyard shift, teaching myself complex coding, encryption, and cybersecurity architecture. I read every manual, took every free online course, and eventually started taking freelance jobs securing small business networks. I was good at it, really good, because I understood the mindset of a thief, even though I had never been one. By the time I was 21, I had developed a proprietary algorithmic defense system for digital assets. I pitched it to a mid-sized tech firm and they bought a license. With that seed money, I founded Aegis Sentinel. We specialized in impenetrable digital vaults for high-net-worth individuals and corporations. The ironic link of my life was not lost on me. The boy who was branded a common thief by his own parents had grown up to become one of the most sought-after protectors of wealth in the country. I poured every ounce of my trauma into my work. I was relentless. By the time I turned 25, Aegis Sentinel had secured major government contracts. A recent valuation put my company at $50 million. I owned a sprawling penthouse in the city center, and my daily driver was a custom-armored Maybach. I had built an empire, but I remained a ghost. I had no social media presence. My company website only listed my first initial and last name on the board of directors. I did not want my family to find me. I did not want their fake pride or their toxic presence in my sanctuary. Uncle Tobias was the only one who knew how successful I had become, and he swore to keep my secret. We grabbed a beer once a month, and he would give me brief updates on the family. According to Tobias, Declan was still living at home at 21, finding himself while supposedly working at a car dealership. Mom and Dad still treated him like royalty, funding his lifestyle while dipping heavily into their retirement savings. I was at peace. I was untouchable. Until a Tuesday afternoon, as I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the city skyline, my private secure line, a number only 3 people in the world had, began to ring. I frowned, looking at the caller ID. The blood rushed out of my head. It was a number I had not seen in 7 years, but one I had memorized out of pure trauma. Mom. I let it ring 5 times before I finally picked up, my voice flat and emotionless. Yes, Holden. Mom's voice came through the speaker, sounding frail and trembling. Oh, thank God. Tobias gave me this number. Please do not hang up. I leaned back in my leather chair. You have 60 seconds. Things have been going missing around the house again, she blurted out, her voice cracking. Dad's rare coins, cash from my purse. And last month, a massive withdrawal from our retirement account. I felt a cold smile creep onto my face. And you are calling to accuse me? Because I am 300 miles away. Unless you think I mastered teleportation, you might want to look closer to home. No. Listen to me, she sobbed. Dad installed hidden cameras in the hallways. We caught the thief, Holden. We caught him on tape. She paused, taking a ragged breath. It is Declan. It has always been Declan. He confessed to everything. Even the watch when you were 15. We were wrong. We are so sorry. I stared at the city below me. The silence stretched on for a long time. We want to make this right, she pleaded. We are having a family dinner at a nice restaurant this Friday. Please come. We want to apologize properly. Let us put the past behind us. They wanted a happy family reunion. I realized then, they did not want my forgiveness. They wanted to relieve their own guilt. They wanted to brush 8 years of psychological torture under the rug with a nice steak dinner. So, I decided to give them a reunion they would never, ever forget. The rest of that phone call was a masterclass in manipulation, though my mother probably convinced herself she was being genuine. She spent the next 5 minutes crying, detailing how shocked and heartbroken they were to discover Declan's true nature. He was just a boy back then, she reasoned, her voice desperate for my validation. We had no idea he was capable of such deceit. You have to understand, Holden, parents make mistakes. We were just trying to protect the family. Protect the family by throwing one son to the wolves to save the other, I replied coldly. We want to fix it. Just come to dinner. Dad is even talking about helping you out financially to make up for lost time. We can be a real family again. I hung up without giving her a firm answer. I sat in the deafening silence of my office, my mind racing. A normal person might have felt a sense of vindication, but all I felt was an overwhelming, burning anger. 8 years. I lost my teenage years, my savings, my sense of safety, and my dignity. I spent nights shivering in my car, eating discarded food, wondering why I was so unlovable. And their solution was a dinner invitation and a vague promise of financial help? I called Uncle Tobias. You gave her my number. He sighed heavily on the other end of the line. I am sorry, kid. She was having a full breakdown. They finally saw the tapes. Declan has been bleeding them dry for years. I thought maybe you would want to hear them admit they were wrong. I do not care about their apologies, Tobias. Apologies do not pay back the $4,500 Dad stole from me. Apologies do not erase the humiliation at graduation. I know, Tobias said softly. But maybe it is time to close that chapter. Go to the dinner. Hear them out. And if it is garbage, you can walk away forever knowing you gave them one last chance. I thought about it for 2 days. My cybersecurity mind viewed the situation like a breached firewall. My parents were the compromised nodes and Declan was the malware. If I ignored it, the malware would just keep running. If I wanted to truly secure the system, I had to expose the malware entirely and destroy it. I decided to go to the dinner. But I was not going as the broken 18-year-old runaway. I was going as the CEO of Aegis Sentinel. I chose a modest outfit. No designer labels, no flashy watch. Just a simple button-down shirt and jeans. I drove a rental sedan instead of my Maybach. I wanted them to think I was still struggling. I wanted them to show me exactly who they were when they thought they still had the upper hand. I arrived at the restaurant, a mid-tier Italian place that my parents considered fancy. I spotted them at a corner booth. Dad looked older, grayer. Mom looked tired. And sitting across from them, scrolling on his phone with an air of absolute boredom, was Declan, the golden child, the thief. I walked over and stood by the table. Mom looked up, gasped, and immediately stood to try and hug me. I took a step back, raising a hand. "Let us skip the hugs," I said, sliding into the booth next to Declan. He barely looked up from his screen. Dad cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Holden, thank you for coming. We have a lot to talk about." "We do," I agreed, picking up a menu. "So let us hear it. You found out your golden boy is a criminal. How does it feel?" Dad bristled, his old defensive instincts kicking in. "Keep your voice down. We are handling the situation with your brother privately." Handling it privately. Of course. When it was me, they screamed it from the rooftops and stripped me in front of hundreds of people. When it was Declan, it was a private family matter to be handled with care. I looked at Declan. "Nothing to say, little brother? You let me take the fall for 8 years. Declan finally put his phone down. He looked at me, and there was no remorse in his eyes. Just annoyance. "Look, man, I was a kid. I wanted the watch, I took it, and when Dad freaked out, I panicked and threw it in your room. Get over it. It is ancient history. Get over it." I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. This was not a dinner of redemption. This was a dinner of convenience. My parents wanted me back so they could feel better about themselves, and Declan was just annoyed he got caught. "I see," I said softly. Dad leaned forward, folding his hands on the table. "Listen, Holden. We feel terrible about the past. We really do. To show you we mean it, Mom and I have been talking. We know you have probably been having a hard time out there on your own. We want to buy you a car. A reliable, used vehicle. Around $5,000. It will help you get to whatever job you have. Get you back on your feet. A $5,000 used car. To buy back my soul." Declan snorted, taking a sip of his water. "Yeah. Take the handout. Bro, whatever janitor gig you are working probably doesn't pay enough for bus fare." Mom frowned, but she did not reprimand him. She just looked at me with pity. "He is just acting out because he is stressed, Holden. Please do not take it to heart. Let us just be a family again." I did not yell. I did not scream. I looked at the three of them, and I realized they were pathetic. I stood up slowly. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and dropped it onto the table. "Thanks for the water," I said. "Enjoy your evening. Holden, sit down. Do not walk away from us when we are trying to help you," Dad commanded, his voice rising. I just turned and walked out of the restaurant. Because driving home, my cybersecurity mind was already at work. If Declan was stealing from them now, taking massive withdrawals from their retirement accounts, what else was he doing? It was time to do some digging. The drive back to my penthouse was a blur of neon lights and cold realization. The interaction at the restaurant solidified everything I needed to know. My parents were not sorry for destroying my life. They were sorry their illusion of a perfect family had shattered. And Declan? He was a sociopath in training. When I got home, I threw my jacket onto the couch and walked straight into my home office. It was a room that looked more like a NASA control center, featuring 6 curved monitors, high-end servers humming in the background, and enough computing power to run a small city. I cracked my knuckles and sat down in front of the primary terminal. If Declan thought stealing from our parents was just ancient history, he was about to learn how the real world handles thieves. I started by running a basic background check on Declan Vance. According to public records, he was currently employed as an inventory manager and assistant bookkeeper at a high-end luxury car dealership just outside the city. It was a job Dad had pulled strings to get him. I smiled. A known thief working with luxury assets and company ledgers? That was like putting a fox in charge of the henhouse. I fired up a secure VPN, routing my connection through servers in 3 different countries, and began probing the dealership's public-facing network. Their security was laughable. Within 45 minutes, I had bypassed their outdated firewall and gained read-only access to their internal servers. I was not there to cause damage. I was just there to look. I pulled up the accounting ledgers and the inventory logs. It took me a few hours to cross-reference the data, but the patterns began to emerge like glowing red flags. Declan was not just stealing pocket change anymore. He had upgraded. Over the past 18 months, there was a consistent series of discrepancies in the dealership's maintenance and parts budget. Fake invoices were being generated for high-end parts, turbochargers, custom rims, imported leather interiors that were never actually ordered. The funds for these fake invoices were being routed to a shell LLC. I traced the LLC. It was registered in Delaware, but the routing number pointed to a local bank account, an account registered under the name D. Vance. I ran the numbers. He had embezzled over $500,000. My jaw clenched. 500 grand. But where was the money going? Declan did not own a house, and he drove a standard Honda. I dug deeper into his digital footprint, tracking the IP address he used to log into his work portal. I found the leak: crypto casinos and offshore sports betting sites. Declan was a degenerate gambler. He was bleeding the dealership dry to fund a massive, spiraling gambling addiction. That explained why he was stealing from Dad's retirement fund. He was chasing his losses. But then I found the crown jewel, the ultimate anchor point of his destruction. I was scanning the vehicle inventory logs when I noticed a discrepancy from 3 weeks prior. A client had brought in a 2023 Porsche 911 GT3 for long-term storage and maintenance while they were out of the country. According to the digital log, the car was sitting in Bay 4 of the dealership's secure warehouse. But the GPS telematics data from the vehicle's onboard computer told a different story. The Porsche was currently parked in a long-term storage garage on the seedy side of town. I pulled up the security footage from the dealership's warehouse. The logs had been tampered with, but the backup server retained the raw files. I watched the grainy footage from 3 weeks ago at 2 a.m. There was Declan. He casually walked into the warehouse, used his manager keycard to open the bay, got into the client's Porsche, and drove it out into the night. He had stolen a client's supercar and hidden it. Why? Probably using it as collateral for a loan shark to cover his gambling debts. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in my eyes. I had it all. The fake invoices, the bank routing numbers, the gambling receipts, the GPS data, and the security footage. A massive, undeniable trail of felony crimes. My parents thought Declan's worst crime was stealing Dad's pocket change. They had no idea they were harboring a major felon. I spent the next 2 hours meticulously compiling the evidence into an encrypted, anonymous dossier. I organized it so clearly that a first-year law student could win the case. I did not send it to the local beat cops. I aimed higher. I sent the encrypted package directly to the email of Detective Sullivan, the head of the Financial Crimes Division in our district. I included a brief note. Attached is irrefutable evidence of felony embezzlement, grand theft auto, and wire fraud involving Declan Vance. The Porsche is located at the provided GPS coordinates. Have a productive week. I hit send. The digital package flew through the ether, an unstoppable missile locked onto its target. I leaned back and took a deep breath. For the first time in 8 years, the heavy, suffocating weight on my chest began to lift. I did not know exactly when the police would move in. Financial crime investigations take a few days to verify evidence. But I knew it was coming. The next morning, Mom texted me, "Holden, Dad and I are throwing a big backyard barbecue this Saturday. We invited the whole family, uncles, aunts, cousins. We are going to officially announce that we have reconciled and that we are helping you get back on your feet. Please be there. It will be a fresh start." I stared at the message. Public announcement. They wanted an audience to witness their forgiveness and their supposed charity of handing me a cheap used car. They wanted to play the magnanimous parents in front of the very same relatives who had mocked me and called me a thief for years. I smiled. A dark, cold smile. "I will be there," I texted back. The stage was set. The trap was armed. All I had to do now was show up and watch the empire of lies burn to the ground. The days leading up to the barbecue felt surreal. I went about my normal life, managing Aegis Sentinel, attending board meetings, and securing millions in digital assets. But in the back of my mind, a countdown clock was ticking. Uncle Tobias called me on Thursday night. "So, I hear you are coming to the big party on Saturday," he said, sounding cautiously optimistic. "Your mom is running around like a headless chicken, ordering catering and setting up tents. Dad has been bragging to everyone that he is going to set you straight, give you some financial guidance." I scoffed. Financial guidance, right? "Look, Holden, I know it is going to be tough seeing all those relatives again. Aunt Martha, Cousin Emily. They were pretty brutal to you back in the day. But hold your head high. You survived." "Oh, I am going to do more than hold my head high, Tobias," I said smoothly. "By the way, you might want to stand near the exit when things get started. Just a heads up." "What does that mean?" he asked, suddenly tense. "It means Saturday is going to be very entertaining. Have a good night, Uncle." I hung up before he could press for details. Friday morning, I logged into a secure terminal to monitor the local police dispatch logs. I had written a script that flagged any activity related to Declan's name or the dealership's address. At 10 a.m., the alert flashed on my screen. Detective Sullivan and a team of white-collar crime investigators had executed a search warrant at the luxury dealership. According to the scanner chatter, they were securing the servers and questioning the general manager. At 1 p.m., a secondary unit was dispatched to the GPS coordinates I had provided for the storage garage. 30 minutes later, the scanner confirmed the recovery of the stolen 2023 Porsche 911 GT3. The net was closing, but they had not arrested Declan yet. He had taken Friday off to help set up for the party. He was sitting at home, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire life was imploding across town. The police were building an airtight case, securing the physical assets, and preparing the arrest warrants. I knew how these operations worked. They usually executed high-profile felony arrests at the suspect's residence, often early in the morning or late in the evening to ensure the suspect was present. The timing was almost poetic. Saturday arrived. The weather was bright and sunny, a perfect day for a family barbecue. I took my time getting ready. I showered, shaved, and put on a custom-tailored charcoal suit that cost more than the car my dad was planning to buy me. I slipped my black titanium Centurion card into my inner pocket. I walked down to the subterranean garage of my building. My driver, Marcus, was waiting by the armored Maybach. "Where to today, Mr. Vance?" Marcus asked, holding the door open. "The old neighborhood, Marcus. But I do not want to pull directly into the driveway. Drop me off at the corner of Elm and Maple. I want to walk the last block." "Understood, sir." The drive took 45 minutes. As we cruised through the familiar suburban streets, a wave of nostalgia hit me, quickly followed by a wave of disgust. These were the streets I had walked with my head down, hiding from neighbors who whispered that I was the boy who stole from his own father. Marcus pulled the Maybach smoothly to the curb a block away from my parents' house. "Keep the engine running, Marcus. I might need a quick exit," I said, stepping out of the car. "I will be right here, sir." I walked down the sidewalk, adjusting my cuffs. I could hear the party before I saw it. The sound of classic rock blaring from outdoor speakers, the the smell of grilling meat, and the loud, obnoxious laughter of my extended family. I turned the corner and saw the house. There were at least 20 cars parked along the street. White tents were set up on the back lawn. I walked up the driveway, my polished shoes crunching on the gravel. I pushed open the wooden side gate and stepped into the backyard. The chatter began to die down immediately. Heads turned. Aunt Martha paused with a plastic cup of wine halfway to her mouth. Cousin Emily stopped laughing. They looked at me, taking in the tailored suit, the confident posture, the cold expression on my face. This was not the broken, humiliated 18-year-old they remembered. Mom spotted me and rushed over, wearing a floral apron and a massive, fake smile. "Holden, you made it. Look, everyone, Holden is here," she announced loudly, playing the role of the loving mother to perfection. Dad walked over, holding a pair of grilling tongs. He gave me a stiff nod. "Glad you could make it, son. Go grab a burger. We have a big announcement to make in a few minutes." I looked past him. Sitting in a lawn chair, holding a beer and looking completely bored, was Declan. He saw me, rolled his eyes, and muttered something to Cousin Emily, who giggled. I checked my watch. The Rolex on my wrist was worth 5 times what Dad's stolen vintage piece was. It was 5:45 p.m. "I am not hungry," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the music. "Let us just get to the announcement, Harrison." Dad frowned at the use of his first name but quickly masked his anger with a patronizing smile. He turned to the crowd, tapping his tongs against a glass to get everyone's attention. "Family, friends, gather round," Dad called out. The crowd shuffled closer, forming a semicircle. Uncle Tobias caught my eye from the back of the crowd. He looked tense. "As you all know," Dad began, his voice taking on a theatrical, sorrowful tone, "our family has had its struggles. Holden and I have had our differences. But family is about forgiveness. It is about lifting each other up when someone falls down." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "A check. Holden has had a rough go of it out there in the real world. We know he has struggled without our guidance. So Cora and I have decided to give him a fresh start. We are gifting him $5,000 from Declan's leftover college fund, so he can buy a reliable used car and get his life back on track." Dad held the check out toward me, a smug, self-satisfied look on his face. He waited for the applause. He waited for me to break down in tears of gratitude. I did not move. I just stared at the piece of paper fluttering in his hand. The silence stretched. The smiles on the faces of my relatives began to falter. "Take it, Holden," Mom hissed under her breath. "Do not embarrass us." I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the phantom weight of the $4,500 he had stolen from me 10 years ago. Dad held up the $5,000 check like he was a savior. He waited for me to cry and say thank you, I thought. Instead, I reached into my jacket. It was time to pull the pin on the grenade. Dad held up the $5,000 check like he was a savior. He waited for me to cry and say thank you. He wanted me to reach out with trembling hands, accept his crumbs, and validate his twisted narrative that I was a lost soul who desperately needed his grace. Instead, I reached into my custom-tailored jacket. I did not pull out a handkerchief to wipe away tears. I pulled out my wallet. It was sleek, minimalist, made of carbon fiber. I opened it, pulled out a single card, and tossed it onto the glass patio table next to a plate of half-eaten potato salad. It landed with a heavy, metallic clink. It was a black titanium Centurion card. You do not just apply for one of those. You have to be invited, and the spending requirements are astronomical. Dad looked down at the table, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What is this? A fake credit card? Is this some kind of joke, Holden?" I did not answer him directly. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened the browser, navigated to a specific page, and turned the screen around so he could see it. It was an article from Forbes magazine published just 3 weeks prior. The headline read, "Aegis Sentinel CEO Holden Vance on Revolutionizing Digital Asset Protection." Right beneath the headline was a high-resolution portrait of me standing in front of my corporate headquarters. looking sharp, powerful, and entirely out of his league. The subheading estimated the company's valuation at $50 million. Dad stared at the screen. He squinted, as if his eyes were playing tricks on him. His lips moved slightly as he silently read the words, $50 million. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. I let the silence hang for a few seconds, letting the reality of the situation crash over the entire crowd. Aunt Martha was leaning in, trying to see the screen. Cousin Emily's jaw had practically unhinged. You took $4,500 of my blood and sweat when I was 16 years old, I said, my voice dangerously calm, carrying across the silent backyard. You stole it to teach me a lesson about a crime your perfect little golden boy committed. And now, you want to buy my forgiveness with $5,000. I gestured to my clothes. The suit I am wearing right now costs more than the rusted-out car you were planning to buy me. The watch on my wrist is worth 5 times what your precious vintage Rolex was worth. I do not need your money, Harrison. I never did. I built an empire with my bare hands while you were busy funding a criminal. Mom let out a strange, breathy gasp, stepping back as if I had physically struck her. Holden, a CEO? 50 million? But you left with nothing. How did you? I learned how to protect assets because I grew up in a house where my own parents stole from me, I replied, my eyes locking onto hers. I took the trauma you inflicted on me and turned it into an impenetrable fortress. I turned my gaze to Declan. The golden child was no longer slouching in his chair. He was sitting bolt upright, his beer forgotten on the grass beside him. The smug, bored expression had melted off his face, replaced by a dawning realization that the brother he had mocked for years was playing in a completely different universe. You let me take the fall, Declan? I said softly, stepping toward him. You let them lock me in my room. You let them strip me in front of my graduating class. You sat there and smiled while my life was ruined. Declan swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Hey man, I did not know you were doing so well. That is crazy. Good for you, bro. Do not call me bro. I snapped, the ice in my voice making him flinch. You are a parasite. You bled them dry, and now you are bleeding your employer dry. Did you really think nobody would notice the fake invoices? Did you think you could just hide a client's Porsche and gamble away $500,000 without leaving a trace? The backyard erupted into chaos. $500,000? Porsche? What are you talking about? Dad shouted, his voice cracking with panic. He looked from me to Declan, his eyes wide with terror. Holden, what lies are you spreading now? They are not lies, Dad. I am a cybersecurity expert. Finding his digital trail was like following breadcrumbs left by a toddler. Mom ran over to Declan, grabbing his shoulders. Declan, sweetie, what is he talking about? Tell him he is lying. Tell everyone he is lying. Declan was hyperventilating, his eyes darting toward the side gate. He knew he was trapped. He knew I had the receipts. Mom, it is a mistake. I can fix it. I just need a little time. But time was the one thing Declan had run out of. They were speechless, staring at me like I was an alien who had just landed on their manicured lawn. But the real show was not my bank account, and it was not my Forbes feature. The real show was the sound of heavy tires rolling up to the curb. 3 black unmarked SUVs pulled into the driveway, their red and blue grille lights flashing aggressively, casting erratic shadows across the white party tents. The sound of car doors slamming echoed like gunshots in the quiet suburban neighborhood. The chatter in the backyard died instantly, replaced by a suffocating, terrified silence. Everyone froze. Aunt Martha actually dropped her plastic cup of wine. It hit the grass with a wet thud, a red stain spreading across the green lawn like a bad omen. 5 officers in tactical vests strode purposefully through the side gate, moving with the kind of urgent authority that tells you they are not there for a noise complaint. Leading them was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a sharp suit, a gold detective's badge clipped to his belt. He scanned the terrified faces of my family before his eyes locked onto the golden child. Declan Vance? The detective's voice boomed. It was not a question. Declan let out a high-pitched whimper. He tried to stand up, but his legs seemed to give out beneath him. He fell back into his lawn chair, shaking violently. Mom threw herself in front of Declan, holding her arms out as if her floral apron could stop a team of federal investigators. "Excuse me, what is the meaning of this? You are trespassing on private property. We are having a family party." The detective did not even blink. He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket. "I am Detective Sullivan with the Financial Crimes Task Force. I have a warrant for the arrest of Declan Vance." Dad stepped forward, his tongs still clutched in his trembling hand. "Arrest? For what? My son is an inventory manager. He is a good boy. There has to be a misunderstanding." Detective Sullivan's expression was carved from granite. "There is no misunderstanding, sir. Your son is being charged with multiple counts of felony wire fraud, grand theft auto, and the embezzlement of over $500,000 from his employer." The number hung in the air. $500,000. The relatives surrounding us gasped. Cousin Emily backed away slowly, as if Declan had suddenly become radioactive. "No, that is impossible," Mom shrieked, her voice tearing at the seams. "He would never do that. He is a good boy. Holden is the one who steals. Ask him. Holden is the thief." Even in the face of federal agents, her first instinct was to throw me under the bus. But this time I had armor she could not pierce. Detective Sullivan glanced at me, taking in my tailored suit and calm demeanor, then looked back at my mother with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Ma'am, we have secured a stolen 2023 Porsche 911 GT3 matching the GPS coordinates from a dossier provided to us by an anonymous cybersecurity firm. We also have hours of security footage, bank routing numbers, and offshore gambling receipts directly tying your son to the missing funds. He is going to jail." Two uniformed officers stepped around my mother, ignoring her hysterical screams. They grabbed Declan by the arms, hauling him out of the lawn chair. "Mom! Dad! Do something!" Declan wailed, his voice cracking as they shoved him face first against the patio table. "Declan, do not say anything," Dad yelled, panic seizing him. He dropped the grilling tongs, reaching out uselessly toward the officers. "You are hurting him. He is just a kid." "He is a 21-year-old adult facing a decade in prison, sir," Sullivan corrected sharply. He looked around the yard at the stunned relatives. "And let me make this very clear to everyone present. Anyone found to be hiding assets for Mr. Vance or assisting in covering up his gambling debts will be charged as an accomplice to felony fraud. I suggest you all choose your loyalties carefully today." That was all it took. The flying monkeys scattered. Aunt Martha grabbed her purse and hurried toward the gate without a backward glance. Cousin Emily dragged her husband away, whispering furiously. The people who had mocked me, judged me, and sided with my parents for years were now running for the hills to save their own skin. Click. The sound of cold steel ratcheting around Declan's wrists echoed across the patio. They hauled him upright. He was crying now, ugly, gasping sobs, his face red and splotchy. The smug, untouchable golden boy was gone, replaced by a terrified criminal realizing his actions finally had consequences. Mom collapsed onto the grass. She literally fell to her knees, clutching her head, wailing into the dirt. "It is a mistake. My baby. He is my baby." Dad was hyperventilating, holding onto the edge of the grill to keep himself from falling over. His perfect world, his perfect son, his perfect narrative, all of it was burning to ash right in front of his eyes. As they dragged Declan toward the gate, he twisted his head around, his terrified, tear-filled eyes locking onto me. He saw me standing there, perfectly calm, holding my black titanium card. In that fraction of a second, the truth finally registered in his panicked brain. He knew I was the anonymous cybersecurity firm. He knew I had pulled the trigger. "Holden!" Declan screamed, thrashing against the officer's grip. "Holden, please!" The officers shoved him through the wooden gate, marching him out toward the flashing lights of the SUVs. The backyard, once filled with music and laughter, was now a graveyard of broken illusions. I stood in the center of the wreckage, feeling nothing but cold, absolute closure. The justice outsider had arrived, and the truth was finally, undeniably out in the open. The flashing red and blue lights painted the side of my parents' house in chaotic, strobing patterns. Mom was still on the grass, sobbing uncontrollably into her apron. The remaining relatives had either fled or were standing in shocked, uncomfortable silence near the back fence, pretending they weren't watching a family explode. Dad let go of the grill. His hands were shaking violently as he took a step toward me. The anger that usually masked his fear was gone. He just looked hollowed out, desperate. "Holden," he choked out, his voice hoarse. He pointed a trembling finger toward the street where the police were loading Declan into the back of an SUV. You have money. The article said you have $50 million. Holden, you have to help us. You have to help your brother." I slowly tucked my Centurion card back into my wallet and slid it into my jacket pocket. I looked at him, my expression blank. "Help him do what exactly?" "Pack for prison." "Do not talk like that," Dad pleaded, tears finally spilling over his eyelids. "He needs a lawyer, the best defense attorney in the state. We do not have the money for that, Holden. Our retirement is drained. We cannot afford to fight a federal case. But you can. You can hire a whole team. You can save him." I actually laughed. It was a short, humorless sound that cut through the tension in the yard. "You want me to finance the defense of the man who framed me, ruined my childhood, and stole $500,000 from innocent people?" I asked, shaking my head slowly. Mom scrambled up from the grass, her face smeared with dirt and mascara. She rushed over, grabbing my forearm with desperate, clawing fingers. "Holden, please. He is your blood. He is your brother. You cannot just stand by and watch him go to jail. If you have this much power, you have to use it for your family." I looked down at her hands gripping my sleeve. I felt a surge of disgust. I reached over and peeled her fingers off my jacket, taking a deliberate step back to establish physical distance between us. "You did not care about blood when you locked me in my bedroom for days at a time," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet register. "You did not care about family when you paraded me in front of my high school class and forced me to empty my pockets. You threw me to the wolves to protect him. And now that the wolves have finally come for him, you want me to be the shield." "We were wrong," Dad cried out, stepping closer. "We admitted we were wrong. What more do you want from us?" "I want exactly what is happening right now," I told them smoothly. "I want you to feel what I felt for 8 years. I want you to feel powerless. I want you to feel humiliated. And most importantly, I want you to face the consequences of the monster you created." I adjusted my cuffs, making sure my Rolex caught the light. "My company, Aegis Sentinel, exists to protect hardworking people from thieves like your son. If I hired a lawyer to save him, I would be a hypocrite. Good luck finding a public defender. I hear they are very overworked these days." Dad's face contorted with a mixture of rage and profound despair. "You have no heart," he whispered. "You are just as cold and cruel as everyone says you are." "No, Harrison," I replied. "I am just reflecting the exact amount of love and support you gave me. The mirror is just ugly to look at." I turned my back on them. I did not run and I did not march. I walked at a steady, measured pace toward the side gate. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Uncle Tobias standing near the patio door. He had a small, sad smile on his face. He caught my eye and gave me a firm, proud nod. He understood. He knew this was the only way I could ever truly be free. I walked out the gate and down the sidewalk. The police SUVs were already turning the corner, their sirens starting to wail as they carried the golden boy off to a concrete cell. I reached the corner of Elm and Maple. Marcus was standing by the Maybach, the rear door already open. He did not ask any questions. He just nodded respectfully as I slid into the plush leather seat. "Take us home, Marcus," I said, leaning back and closing my eyes, as the massive V12 engine purred to life and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. I looked out the tinted window. I watched my parents' house shrink in the rearview mirror until it disappeared behind the trees. The nightmare was over. But the fallout from that night was just beginning to destroy them. The next 8 months were a masterclass in watching a toxic ecosystem devour itself. I did not need to hire a private investigator to know what was happening. The gossip mill in my extended family worked faster than broadband internet. Occasionally, Uncle Tobias would stop by my penthouse for a beer and give me the grim updates. Declan's trial was short and brutal. The evidence I had provided to Detective Sullivan was so airtight that Declan's overworked public defender practically begged him to take a plea deal. Facing 20 years if he took it to trial, Declan pleaded guilty to felony embezzlement and grand theft auto. The judge was not lenient. Given the sheer scale of the theft and the betrayal of trust to his employer, Declan was sentenced to 7 years in state prison for the state fraud, theft, and embezzlement charges, with a minimum of 5 years served before he was eligible for parole. The golden child traded his designer clothes for an orange jumpsuit. But the devastation did not stop at the prison gates. The luxury car dealership filed a massive civil suit against my parents to recover the stolen $500,000. Because Declan had been living under their roof and using their internet connections to execute his wire frauds. The dealership's aggressive corporate lawyers argued that my parents were liable, or at least negligent enough to be sued into oblivion. Faced with mounting legal fees and the threat of total bankruptcy, Harrison and Cora made the only choice they had left. They sold the house, the beautiful, sprawling suburban home with the manicured lawn, the large backyard, and the study where Dad used to keep his precious watch collection. It was all liquidated. But the housing market was soft, and they had to sell it below market value just to get the cash fast enough to settle the lawsuit. It still was not enough. To cover the remaining balance of the restitution and their own legal bills, Dad had to drain his 401k and liquidate his entire watch collection. Every vintage piece, every rare coin he had prized above his own son, was auctioned off to pay for Declan's crimes. They were left with absolutely nothing. The social fallout was even worse. Aunt Martha, Cousin Emily, and the rest of the extended family, the flying monkeys who had gladly tormented me for years, cut my parents off completely. Nobody wanted to be associated with a family that harbored a convicted felon. My parents were uninvited from Thanksgiving, ignored at Christmas, and blocked on social media. The isolation they had forced upon me in my teenage years had finally come back around to swallow them whole. According to Tobias, my parents moved into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown part of town. The building had plumbing issues, the elevator rarely worked, and the walls were paper-thin. Dad, who had planned on retiring in 2 years, was forced to take a job as a night shift security guard at a warehouse just to make rent. Mom had to start working the cash register at a local discount grocery store. Their health deteriorated rapidly. The stress, the shame, and the grueling labor aged them a decade in a matter of months. They had no golden child to brag about, no wealth to hide behind, and no pride left to sustain them. They were broken. I heard all of this while sitting on the balcony of my penthouse, sipping a glass of rare scotch, watching the city lights twinkle below me. I did not feel pity. I did not feel joy. I just felt a profound sense of balance. The universe had corrected its scales. But toxic people rarely accept their fate with quiet dignity. When they run out of options, they always return to the well they tried to poison, hoping there is still some fresh water left. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came crawling back. I just did not expect them to be so desperate. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, almost a year to the day after Declan was arrested. I was in the middle of a video conference with a defense contractor when my desk phone buzzed. It was the head of security for my corporate building. "Mr. Vance, I apologize for the interruption," the security chief said. "But we have a situation in the main lobby. An older couple is here. They are causing a bit of a scene, demanding to see you. They claim to be your parents." I paused the video feed. I looked at the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office. "Tell them to wait," I said calmly. "I will be right down." I took the private executive elevator down to the ground floor. The doors slid open to reveal the sprawling, marble-floored lobby of the Aegis Sentinel building. It was an intimidating space, designed to project wealth and impenetrable security. Standing near the front reception desk, looking small and entirely out of place, were my parents. I almost did not recognize them. Dad was hunched over, his shoulders slumped, wearing a cheap, rain-soaked windbreaker. His hair had gone completely white, and his face was deeply lined with exhaustion. Mom looked frail, holding a worn-out handbag, her eyes darting nervously around the opulent lobby. They looked exactly like what they were, two people who had lost everything. When they saw me approach, Dad's face crumpled. He took off his wet cap, wringing it in his hands. "Holden," he croaked, his voice cracking. "Thank you. Thank you for coming down." I stopped 10 feet away from them, keeping my hands in my pockets. Two large security guards stood discreetly nearby, ready to intervene if I gave the signal. "Make it fast," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast space. Mom stepped forward, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. "Holden, please. We are so sorry to show up like this, but we did not know where else to go. We have nothing left. We can barely afford groceries. The rent is due next week, and Dad's back is giving out. We are going to be evicted." She reached a trembling hand out toward me, but she did not dare close the distance. "You are our son. We know we made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but we are begging you. Just a small loan. Just enough to keep a roof over our heads. Please, find it in your heart to help your family." Family. The word tasted like ash. I looked at Harrison, the man who had torn my room apart, who had humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, who had stolen my hard-earned money. He was crying now, silent tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I am sorry," Dad whispered, looking down at the marble floor. "I failed you. I failed everyone. Just, please do not let us end up on the street." I stared at them for a long, heavy moment. I felt the collective weight of 8 years of trauma, anger, and betrayal welling up in my chest. This was the moment I had dreamed of when I was sleeping in my car. The moment I held their fate in my hands. I slowly pulled my hand out of my pocket. I was holding a thick, white envelope. Dad's eyes snapped up, a flicker of desperate hope lighting up his exhausted face. Mom let out a shaky breath, reaching her hands out as if I were handing her salvation. I walked forward and handed the envelope to my father. He took it with shaking hands, holding it like it was made of fragile glass. "Open it," I commanded. He fumbled with the flap, pulling open the envelope. Inside was a stack of crisp $100 bills. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "Holden, I do not know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. We will pay you back, I swear. Count it," I said, my voice deadpan. Dad frowned, confused, but he pulled the stack of cash out and quickly thumbed through it. When he reached the end, he paused. He looked at the money, then looked at me, a sudden, sickening realization dawning in his eyes. "It is $4,500, Dad whispered. "Exactly," I said, stepping back. "That is the money you stole from me when I was 16. I am giving it back to you. No interest. No strings attached. You wanted your slate wiped clean? Consider your debt paid." Mom looked at the money, then at my cold, unyielding face. "But, Holden, this will only cover 1 month of rent and food. What about after that? What are we supposed to do?" "I suggest you get a second job," I replied smoothly. "Or maybe you can mow lawns and deliver newspapers. I hear it is a great way to build character." Dad stared at me, his face crumbling into absolute despair. He realized, finally, that this was not a loan. This was a severance package. "Holden, please," he begged, falling to his knees right there on the marble floor. "We are your parents. You cannot just abandon us." I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. "I am not abandoning you, Harrison. I am just letting you experience the consequences of your own actions. You chose your golden child. Now you get to live in the world he built for you." I turned to the security chief, who was watching the exchange with professional detachment. "These people are trespassing," I told the chief loudly. "Escort them out." If they ever step foot on my property or near this building again, call the police and have them arrested. Understood, Mr. Vance? The chief said, signaling his guards. The guards stepped forward, grabbing Dad by the arms and pulling him to his feet. Mom was sobbing hysterically as they were ushered toward the revolving glass doors. Holden, please. We love you. Mom screamed over her shoulder, her voice echoing off the walls. I turned my back and walked toward the private elevator. I did not look over my shoulder. I did not hesitate. Seeing them clutch that envelope, realizing it was all they would ever get from my empire, was the final, satisfying closure I had waited 8 years for. It has been 3 years since that day in the lobby. I have not seen or spoken to my parents since. From what Uncle Tobias tells me, they are still scraping by in that terrible apartment. Dad works the night shift and Mom clips coupons. Declan is still sitting in a concrete cell, halfway through his sentence, spending his days regretting the fact that he threw his life away for a few years of easy money. As for me, I have never been better. Aegis Sentinel continues to grow, and my net worth is steadily climbing. But the money is not what brings me peace. True peace came from cutting the rot out of my life. People talk about forgiveness like it is a magical cure-all. Society tells us that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, and that you must always honor your parents no matter how deeply they hurt you. But I learned the hard way that toxic people do not change just because they share your DNA. Sometimes, forgiveness is just a tool abusers use to wipe their own slates clean so they can start hurting you all over again. I found my real family in the people who actually stood by me. Uncle Tobias comes over every Sunday for a barbecue on my penthouse terrace. He is retired now, and I make sure he never has to worry about his medical bills or his pension. He believed in me when I had nothing, and now that I have everything, he gets to share in it. I also started a foundation under Aegis Sentinel. We provide full-ride college scholarships and housing assistance to teenagers who have been kicked out of their homes or abandoned by their families. When I hand those kids a check, I know exactly what it means to them. It means freedom. It means a chance to build an empire of their own. I look back at the 15-year-old kid crying on the floor of his locked bedroom, wondering why he was not good enough for his parents' love. If I could go back in time, I would put a hand on his shoulder and tell him to hold on. I would tell him that the pain he is feeling is going to forge him into something unbreakable. Some people tell me I should have helped my parents when they were on their knees. They say that leaving 2 elderly people to struggle in poverty is cruel, that I should have been the bigger person and paid my brother's debts just because we share the same blood. But honestly, I think leaving them to face the consequences of their own toxic parenting was the most loving thing I could do. They spent their whole lives protecting Declan from the real world, and it destroyed him. I refused to do the same for them. Am I wrong? Should I have given them the millions they begged for, just because they gave me life? Or was handing back their $4,500 the perfect amount of justice? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I would love to read your perspective on whether blood truly means you owe someone your hard-earned peace. If you made it this far into the story, thank you so much for listening. Please write the word win in the comments section. It stands for win, for those of you who watched all the way to the end. I will be hearting and replying to every single comment that includes that keyword. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more daily Reddit stories. Your support helps me bring more of these insane family dramas to life. Until next time, stay safe, protect your peace, and never let anyone make you pay for a crime you didn't commit.